Hello, folks. This is Professor Prince, and this is continuing the series of just in case makeup videos. This one is for Thursday, August 25th. I'm going to start off just by very quickly saying I'm still in Austria. My windows are open, and so I just want to let you know there might be the occasional background noise, and I apologize for that in advance. In this lecture, this is the preparation for the first assignment, and we're going to look at artists who are influenced by other artists. Now, most artists are, but the artists we're going to look at will be able to see direct correlations and how they use imageries and ideas for other artists to make their own work and statements. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to get started. Okay, just one second. There we go. So the first artist that we're going to look at is one of my favorites. This is Enrique Chagoya. Enrique grew up in Mexico City. He studied economy and now is a professor of art at Stanford University. His work oftentimes comments on contemporary politics, as well as the reality of colonization. So we'll see that in some of these pieces. So the first pieces that we're going to look at are a little bit older, but I think you can probably identify some of the places where Enrique is borrowing to make his political statement. This piece is about Ronald Reagan and his treatment of people in Central America, his international policy. And he's directly, of course, borrowing from the silhouette of that well-known mouse that we all know, Mickey, which is in turn a comment on how Ronald Reagan was an actor before he became a politician. And he is also including the second small mouse was a well-known senator who Jesse Helms, who shut down the NEA and funding for artists. So there's kind of a couple of expressions here. So he's able, and this question may come up right away, Enrique is able to get away with using the image of Mickey Mouse, both because it's been altered, but because he's making a political statement here. The next image about both Presidents Bush, and of course here, although the appropriation isn't quite as direct, we know from the power pose and the cape that he's referencing Superman and his laser beam eyes, right? And both of these images are charcoal and pastel drawings. So as I mentioned, Enrique is from Mexico, and he does do a lot of work that references the realities of colonization. And he does so in a format oftentimes based on codices that were found in Aztec and Mayan communities. So here he is contrasting the Aztec warrior with Superman. And then also within this kind of collage, giving us that image of what actually happened. So he's kind of pulling from all of these sources to make a complete statement about a historical event and what happened to a culture. Now, Chagoya actually means, Enrique will tell you this, I've heard him say it in his lectures, from Goya. So this is one of Enrique's prints that might remind you of this print by Francesco Goya, the well-known Spanish printmaker. Okay, so Enrique has done a lot of prints where he looks at Goya's work and then has made subtle changes, right? So I'll go back. So here in this series, we have this bookkeeping monstrous character, and a lot of Goya's work was also very political about the atrocities that were happening in Spain during his life. And here again, obviously we see Ronald Reagan's face on that monster form. Otherwise, the composition is pretty much the same, right? And the title, Against the Common Good. Here is another one of Enrique's pieces. And here again, we see this, so two of Enrique's pieces. And this is the piece that he was inspired by, again, Francesco de Goya. So this is the sleep of reason produces monsters. So we see this character sleeping and all of these bats and owls and other things that appear to be haunting that figure. We see in the first version of that Enrique Chagoya has done, we see those monsters being replaced with military jets and bombs. So definitely a statement against the military industrial complex. And then we see that here taken even a step further. The composition has been greatly changed, right? The figure that starts out fairly large in the original Goya piece has been reduced down very small, and the world around him is going up in nuclear bombs and explosions. And we see to the side all the elements of culture, painting, music, etc., also being burnt up. Okay, so definitely a political statement. And what works really well about these are Goya's pieces are very well known, and Enrique can stay true to them, but then making it relevant about today's world. Okay. All right, so the next artist, so first Enrique Chagoya, now we're moving on to Keanu Wiley. And I'm hopeful that all of you know who Keanu Wiley is. This is probably one of the paintings for which he's most well known, the official presidential portrait of Barack Obama. But Keanu has studios around the world. In his practice, he is very transparent about how he references and uses art historical images. So it's really easy to find the comparisons from the work he has done and the images that he is borrowing or stealing from. So here we see, and his title too gives it away, right? After Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, The Virgin and Heart. Okay, and then we see the actual painting. So what Keanu does is he borrows the composition, right? In this case, the White Virgin Mary, and substitutes a person of color in the same pose, okay? And oftentimes he completely reworks the background. So here's another example, Naomi and her daughters. And I should say these are also fairly large, 180 inches by 95 inches. And this is the piece where the format of the figures, the composition came from George Dahl's painting, Naomi and her daughters. And again, I think it's really important that in this work, Wiley actually uses the title and he lets us know he's being very transparent about what he's doing and how that relates with the ideas in his work. So what he is often known for doing is he'll start off with the art historical piece that he wants to do something about. So here we have a painting, most likely a husband and a wife, right? He actually goes out and he finds people, sometimes on the street, and as we see here, actually at the beach, and I think this is in South America, and then talks to these individuals, tells them what he is doing, and then he takes them back to the studio for a photo session. So here we can see that translation. I'll go back. So here's the photo of the two individuals and the translation into the finished painting and how, and this is what I should say, what I feel like the concept behind a lot of this work is the, putting other and different people into the canon, into the conversation. So in taking this image of a white man and woman that are most likely husband and wife and giving us two men of color, he is creating a very different conversation. But that's not all that he's doing, right? So if we look at these amazing ornate backgrounds, which I think are so lush, I love looking at them. he is also borrowing from other artists there. So in this painting by Wiley, and here is a close-up, he is borrowing from William Morris. And here's another good example. So what you're seeing on the left here is a wallpaper designed by William Morris. William Morris was an artist craftsperson in the United Kingdom in the late 19th century, who was interested in reviving the handmade. So he would hand design and print wallpapers and things of that nature. So you can see his pattern here with the irises being incorporated, stolen, if you will, by Wiley and placed in the background of this painting with a slight shift in color pattern. So Wiley does that in a lot of his paintings. This is also a William Morris pattern that's been reworked and altered. Okay, so we can see that he's borrowing from a couple of very distinct sources. He's borrowing from art history and the composition and poses from different paintings from art history, but then he's also borrowing from William Morris and the arts and crafts movement and incorporating the two into his pieces for some pretty phenomenal paintings. All right, our next artist is Audrey Kawasaki. And Audrey is someone that I really like sharing with students because she borrows from a lot of different sources, okay? So the first that we can see in Kawasaki's work, and this is her work on this side, and this is one of the artists that she steals from quite regularly. This is Alphonse Mucha, who is an artist from the, again, late 19th century, who was primarily centered in Prague, who made these amazing images of women that were used for different types of things. This is, you know, part of a calendar and probably a poster too. We can see on there the salon at the Library of Artistic Literature, okay? And we can see the zodiac. So it's very easy to see with these two pieces side by side how she's using the same framing device that Mucha used, the same kind of single solitary figure that is handled in a very similar manner, and those kind of calligraphic, beautifully arabesque things that Mucha has happening with the hair happens in Kawasaki's work, just a little bit reduced. Okay, here is another example where I think you can see that correlation and where she's taking from Mucha. Her figure here of this isolated female figure and the flowers with the decorative components feels very familiar to what Mucha was doing in his work. But I also feel, and in fact, I know that Kawasaki borrows from a lot of other sources. So first of all, I should say, and again, here is Kawasaki's work. Often, but not always, she is drawing and painting on wood. Okay, so graphite and paint washes on wood. It's a beautiful surface to work with, and it becomes an integral part of her work. Here in this example and some of her other pieces, I feel as if she's referencing and very aware of Japanese ukiyo-e prints. So here I've given you 3 examples of ukiyo-e prints of the geisha, and of course the geisha being the learned court woman, whose physical appearance was extremely important. And we see in 2 of these images of the geisha, she is at the mirror and maybe has just completed or is completing her grooming rituals. And her face is turned away from us. And in one, we see her face only through reflection. And that is exactly what Kawasaki is doing here. And I should see Kawasaki is a Japanese American person. She lives on the West Coast. So I feel very confident that she knows these pieces and is borrowing from them. But I also feel, I'm going to take this a step further. So I've shown, I think it's really clear. You can see how she is borrowing, stealing from Muka, how she is aware and is using compositions and protocols from ukiyo-e prints. But I also feel like Kawasaki is a fan of manga and anime. When I look at, and again, here's one of her pieces again on wood. When I look at her figures and when I look at what she does to the facial proportions and sometimes to the body proportions, I see a direct correlation with anime. Okay, so I feel like there's this really powerful thing where she's borrowing from Art Nouveau, ukiyo-e prints, and from manga and anime to make pieces that are very unique to her. It's sort of like cooking, right? With a mixture of spices. So the anime pieces, of course, most of you probably know Sailor Moon, and I think you can indeed see a very similar quality to the proportions of this figure. Okay, so again, that's Audrey Kawasaki, and a great example of an artist stealing from a lot of different places. All right, so the next artist is Roger Shimimura. So Roger Shimimura is also Japanese American. He is of a different generation than Kawasaki, though. And his work is highly influenced by pop art. Now, I'm just going to assume, but maybe I shouldn't, that everyone knows what pop art is. So probably the most famous pop artist is someone that Shimimura is referencing right here in this piece. Yes, it's Andy Warhol, who is known for his Campbell's soup cans. And in this image, Shimimura is directly lifting from Andy Warhol and including the Campbell's soup can, but also in the use of the bright colors and the flat application of paint that we see a lot of pop artists use. And there's other popular culture things coming through here. Anyone know Hello Kitty? And like Audrey Kawasaki, because of his Japanese heritage, he continues again and again to lift from ukiyo-e prints. So here we see the geisha again that I showed you in the ukiyo-e prints from Audrey Kawasaki's work. But here she's surrounded by these pop culture elements. And it seems to be making, in a way similar to Enrique Chagoya's work, a conversation about how do we see contemporary Japanese culture and how is it impacting people like Shimimura. So here we see a self-portrait where he is wearing the traditional kimono, but pulling it back, pop culture reference we all know so well, to show the Superman. So, dealing with those layers of understanding and identity in the same way that Chagoya was. Is he Japanese? Is he American? Is he both? And what does that mean? Which one is shown and why or why not? This is one of Shimimura's better known pieces, and it's a direct play on Washington crossing the Delaware, which is at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And it's this large historical painting of George Washington and others crossing the Delaware, supposedly at a key moment during the American Revolutionary War. So in this case, Shimimura has replaced George Washington with himself and the crew of the boat with different characters from different Japanese ukiyo-e prints. But we still see the American flag. We have the water that feels not like the realistic water and ice that we see in the original painting, but that feels more like a pattern we would see on a kimono. So I think here Shimimura is making it very clear how America as a country has received so much from its immigrants like himself, and that kind of importance of those kind of things. But he's doing it in regards to reflecting back on a very well-known painting about American history. Here's another one of his works that I thought I would point out, where he's also dealing with issues of Japanese American history, and he's referencing screen paintings and ukiyo-e prints. But here we actually see a Japanese American internment camps. This is a very dark part of US history, where during World War II, the American government decided to take Japanese American citizens off of the West Coast and place them into internment camps for the time of the war. And as you can see, barbed wire, it was definitely a forced imprisonment. So Shimimura comments in his creative work about this time in history, but in doing so, he references formats of comic books and screen paintings that are familiar to a lot of us. Okay, so that's the lecture over some really great artists who are doing exactly what I'm asking you to do for the first assignment. So I'm going to end this video, upload it, and will also be an assignment video coming very soon. Take care.